Why don't you take a look at the American story? I want to read through that. It's about the election of 1800 and how during the election they attacked each other personally. So on 313 it says, under the American story, supporters of John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, who were competitors in the presidential election of 1800, fought for their candidates with nasty personal attacks. Scottish immigrant James Callender, a Jefferson supporter, wrote some of the harshest criticisms. During the campaign, he warned voters not to re-elect President John Adams. This is one thing he said. In the fall of 1796, the country fell into a more dangerous juncture than almost any of the old Confederation ever endured. The tardiness and timidity of Mr. Washington were succeeded by the rancor, or bitterness, and insolence, which is arrogance, of Mr. Adams. Think what you have been, what you are, and what, under Adams, you are likely to become. Just saying how horrible of a president he was. Adams' defenders were just as vicious. One went so far as to claim that if Jefferson won, the soil will be soaked with blood and the nation black with crimes. In spite of the campaign's nastiness, the election ended with a peaceful transfer of power from one party to another. The election of 1800 was more than a personal battle, though it was a contest between two parties with different ideas about the role of government. So even way back then in 1800, elections and campaigns were very nasty, just like they are today, except for the difference is today we have a lot more modes and ways to get the information out. Ads, technology, social media, TV, and so on. Where back then, they did have newspapers and things, but couldn't get out as quickly as it does today. So the election of 1800, let's start with that. It was an interesting election. We have our two political parties. And what are those two political parties again? Cooper, give me one of the political parties. Federalist, and another one, Max, was the other political party? Democrat Republicans, yep. And so we've got the two political parties. Now, the Federalists were backing their already incumbent president, of whom, Hunter? The Federalists were backing their incumbent president, the president that is already president. So think about who we've been talking about as president of our country.
Jefferson?
No, not yet. He's not president yet. Abby?
John Adams?
Yeah, so the Federalists are backing the current president of John Adams, even though they don't like him very much. He almost knows he's not going to win, for the most part. And the Democrat Republicans, their big supporter, the big person that they're supporting is who? Jefferson. Okay, but they are also supporting one other person who they, the reason they're backing him is because they want him to get second place and become the vice president. And who is that person, Stephanie? It was in the reading that you had to read for today. Who is the other person running in the Democrat-Republicans party? Oh. Aaron Burr. And here you go from left to right. In the pictures would be John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Aaron Burr. Okay. The Democrat-Republicans were arguing and saying that if we, take over, we will be saving the country from monarchy and oppression. They argued over and over again. They were trying to say that the Alien and Sedition Acts were against the First Amendment. The Federalists, on the other hand, said the country was going to be ruined by radicals. And, John, what is a radical? What's a radical?
People who take extreme political positions.
Yep. So they thought that was going to happen. And the election day comes. Okay, and let's take a look at the votes. How many votes in the Electoral College did John Adams get? Lily, how many votes did John Adams get?
72.
John Adams. 65. How many did Thomas Jefferson get? Marley?
73.
And Aaron Burr got how many? Cooper?
Same as Jefferson.
73. So this automatically says that John Adams is out. Okay, so he's not in the run. Don't cross it out in your notes, but I'd put the voting count next to it. Okay, now there's a tie. And this next part's not in the notes, but I jotted down, okay, so you know. there's a tie between these two men, and if there's a tie, according to the Constitution, what happens? Who breaks the tie? Do we revote? Do we flip a coin? What happens if there's a tie? Austin? No, I changed your mind. Dev? The House of Representatives chooses. So I would get that down. If there's a tie, the House chooses. Well, there's a big problem because the majority of the people still in the House of Representatives belong to what party? Political party, Abby?
Federalist.
The Federalists. So they don't even want either of these guys to win. Okay? So the tie is going to go to the House, and they have to figure out who they want to be the president. And they themselves are divided on if they want Jefferson or Burr. Okay? Some feared Jefferson. They were scared of him becoming president, so they backed Aaron Burr. Others thought that Burr was unreliable, so they preferred Jefferson. Most people didn't like either of them. And Alexander Hamilton stood up in front of the House and said, he hated Jefferson big time. Remember, they debated a lot. And he said, if there's a man that I ought to hate in this world, it is Jefferson. But for the public good, which is more important than everything, we should basically vote for Jefferson. So he stood up in front of everyone saying how much he hated Jefferson so much and how bad he would be, but he was willing to vote for him because Aaron Burr was even worse. So could you imagine being Aaron Burr and knowing they said this about you? Okay, he was not happy at all, and we'll come back to that a little later. But over 7 days, they voted. Each state gets one vote. They voted 35 times. Could not figure out a winner because they just kept splitting. So finally, 2 weeks before the inauguration, they finally came up with a winner because they were able to persuade the Federalists to not vote for Burr. Basically, the 36th vote. Who becomes our president, third president? Cooper? Jefferson. So he becomes the president, put a P, and Aaron Burr then becomes vice president after listening and hearing that nobody wants him. He's going to be president. So people were very, very happy. Aaron Burr will never forget those insults. This is going to come back. Okay, so we're going to come back to his insults and him being upset here in a little bit. So I have a video clip on what happens if there's a tie in the Electoral College today. Now the video is kind of confusing. He talks fast, and it's confusing. If there's a tie today, what would happen? So I want you to pay close attention because he lets you know how many people can vote and how many members there are. You're going to notice that there's a lot of even numbers. And when you're dividing even numbers, what can happen all the time? Ties. So you're going to notice this. So pay close attention because it's a very confusing system. But this is what happens if there's a tie today. All right, so
the United States picks its president with the Electoral College, 538 votes distributed by population, mostly to the 50 states and D.C. To become president, you need to win a majority of those votes. But 538 is an even number, so what happens when the race for president is tied? Don't worry, there's an 18th century solution to the problem. If the Electoral College is tied, the House of Representatives breaks that tie. As the name implies, the House is filled with representatives from each of the states. The more people in a state, the more representatives it has, and there are 435 in total. Thankfully, an odd number and a guaranteed tiebreaker. Except, there's a catch. Each representative doesn't get one vote, it's each state that gets one vote. So Florida's 27 representatives have to decide amongst themselves who to support before casting Florida's one vote to help break the tie. Meanwhile, thinly populated Alaska's sole representative has only to consult himself before casting Alaska's vote. This is an incredibly disproportionate system because just 10 states, California, Texas, New York, Florida, Illinois, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Georgia, and North Carolina, contain more than half the population of the United States but get only 20% of the votes if the race for president is tied, and the other 40 states with less than half the population get 80% of the votes. While an exact tie is unlikely, this system is also used if there are more than 2 candidates for president and none of them gets a majority in the Electoral College, which is exactly what happened when 4 candidates ran for president in 1824. Andrew Jackson got the most votes from Americans and the most votes in the Electoral College, but not a majority, so the race was turned over to the House of Representatives voting as states who picked John Quincy Adams instead. In a modern America with more states, a 3-way race can have horrifically disproportionate results. Consider a third-party candidate who loves the small states and who the small states love in return. He gets the fewest Electoral College votes, but enough to ensure that neither of the two more popular candidates gets a majority, so now the House decides the winner. And those 26 smallest states, representing just 17% of the population, can pick their man as president, even though 83% of Americans didn't vote for him. It's unlikely, but it really shouldn't even be possible. Anyway, all this talk of presidents has left the vice president unmentioned. A reasonable person might assume that he just comes along with the president, but no. When there's a tie, the Senate independently picks the vice president, so the United States could end up with a president from one party and a vice president from the other, which might make for some very uncomfortable meetings. But even this crazy system for resolving a tie isn't guaranteed to work because there are 100 members of the Senate, and in the House of Representatives they're forced to vote as 50 states, and many of those states have 10 or 8 representatives, making the whole system tie-tacular with all of those even numbers. So if the House can't pick the president, but the Senate has picked the vice president, then the vice president becomes acting president until the House can make up its mind. But if neither the House can pick the president, nor the Senate can pick the vice president, then the Speaker of the House becomes acting president until either branch of Congress picks someone. And that's how the United States would resolve a tied race for president, though it might be faster and more fair to just flip a coin.
Say that's confusing? Yeah, I think that's pretty darn confusing. But
Of course, you could get rid of the Electoral College.
Of course you could. So, there we have it. But Jefferson is our president, third president. So, we talked about Hamilton and Burr. All right? Aaron Burr never forgot the fact that Hamilton said those nasty things about him, and so he is upset. Well, in 1804, so Aaron Burr is the vice president, and he's the vice president from 1801 to 1804, and then they replaced him with someone else because they didn't like him. So it says under the strange but true, in 1804, the Democrat-Republicans replaced Aaron Burr as their candidate for vice president. Burr then decided he's going to run for governor of New York. Alexander Hamilton questioned Burr's fitness for public office, and he wrote that Burr was a dangerous man who ought not to be trusted with the reins of government. Burr lost the election, and he thought that it was Hamilton's fault. So he's furious, so he challenged Hamilton to a duel. Hamilton went to the duel, but resolved not to fire. Burr did, shot Hamilton, who died the next day. You guys know what a duel is, right?
Yeah.
Duel is where you got the two guys, they got a gun, they turn their backs, and they walk away and turn and shoot. It was legal back then, most places.
Who's the person behind the trees?
Probably just somebody watching it, because people would go and watch it and bet on it and stuff. It was like a football game. So they go, and he challenges him to a duel, and you don't, Brennan, you don't say, no, I'm not, I'll pass. You don't. You go to the duel. But Hamilton wanted to let him know, listen, this is ridiculous. I'm not going to shoot at you, okay? So duels were not illegal in a lot of places. They were illegal in New York, but they held their duel in New Jersey where it was illegal. So they do the deal. Hamilton doesn't shoot. Burr does. Shoots Hamilton, who dies the next day. So then, as soon as people found out that Hamilton died, they were outraged. They were very, very upset with Aaron Burr. He was charged with murder, indicted with murder in New York and New Jersey. He, returned to Washington to resume his office, but then after his first term was over, his career was over because nobody voted him back in, and that was about it. So, you ever get on Jeopardy? Who shot Hamilton? Aaron Burr, the vice president. By the way, he was vice president when he did this. Isn't that interesting? I think it's kind of funny. So there you have it. That's what ended up with Burr. Don't say bad stuff about people, I guess. So let's move on to Jefferson's philosophy. All right, we're going to be on page 315 a little bit. And he had a very strong opinion on how he wanted the country to be run. He did not want it to be run how John Adams had it. All right, he wanted it to be different. So his first order of business was to try to get everybody's division and political division, all of that, just stop it and get everybody to calm down. Okay, so take a look at the question here. I want you to write out the question and try to just do a couple bullet statements to answer it. How did Jefferson plan to unite Americans? All right, take a little bit of time to look through that, and then see if you can answer them in bullets. And uniting the country together to stop this division. Jacob.
He promoted a common way of life.
Yeah, he promoted this common way of life. He wanted kind of everybody in the country to have this common way of life, nice, easygoing life. And with this common way of life, what did he say would this look like, a common way of life? Austin?
He said it should have many farmers and an enormous amount of land.
Yeah, he wanted a lot of land within the country, and he wanted the country to be this country of farmers. Well, next section, we're going to get this land that he wants. Does anyone know where this land comes from? Max? Doesn't come from the Spanish. Hunter?
Louisiana.
It's the Louisiana territory that we purchased from the French. And so that really helps his idea of getting this country of small independent farmers. So this common way of life is this farmers. He doesn't want these huge crowded cities like they have in Europe. That's kind of why a lot of people got away from Europe, it's the overcrowded cities. And so farmers, Eric, what type of a life do farmers live?
Very laid-back style.
Laid-back style. And what type of values do people like you guys have? We're supposed to have, they say.
well,
Good values?
yeah,
Bad
yeah,
people,
we
good?
Put family first usually.
Nice. That's perfect. Not to say that people that live in the city don't do that. But, yeah, people that live in the farm, they're nice, easygoing style. They have these strong morals, good values, family first. And that's kind of what Jefferson's looking for. He doesn't want people to be all high and mighty above, oh, I work in the city, I work in a big office. Who are you, little farmer boy? You know, that's just not what he wanted. So even Jefferson, the president of the country, lived his life like he was a farmer, by the way. He farmed for a while, so he behaved like a gentleman. And he didn't see himself above anybody else. He didn't ride around in fancy carriages that they offered him because he was president. He walked like the rest of the country did. He, in the White House, did not have a long rectangular table. He had a round table. Okay, tell me how that is promoting a nice common way of life. Nick?
He can't sit at the table.
There's no head of the table. Everybody's equal at a round table. If you never knew that, that's why people have round tables, I guess. He walked places. He served nice meals, but again, they had the round table where no one could have a head of the table. He refused to make himself higher than anybody else. And like he was the one that removed that bow when you meet people. Instead of bowing, he just shook hands. You shake hands. That's what you do. And he even answered the door himself. Anyone could go to the White House back then, by the way. It was until Lincoln was assassinated that up through Lincoln, you wanted to go see the president, jump to the White House, stand in line. Anyone could go. Today, the road is blocked. You're not getting in. So people would come to the door, knock on the door, and he answered it. He didn't let anyone else answer it. He answered, and he'd even answer it in his pajamas. If he was in his pajamas, I'm good, I can answer the door. He didn't care, because he didn't rank himself above anybody else. He didn't want to make anyone appear less than him. Even on his grave, the one thing he was proud of most was what? What was he most proud of that he did, Max?
Creating the Declaration of Independence.
Writing the Declaration of Independence. So he put that on there, but he left out all the other important stuff because he, is not better than anybody else. So I think that's what makes him an excellent president. I really like Jefferson as a president. He's in my top 3. So if you flip it over to 316, now that's how he sees the people looking, the country. This was going to unite the country, make everybody all happy. Okay? Well, now this is how the role of government. Write the question down. What did he believe about the role of government? All right? Look at that Undoing Federalist Program section and jot a few bullet statements down about what his government is going to look like. What does his role of government look like? What does he see the government, Brett, like?
He thinks that all forms of government should kind of be equal, or I don't know.
Okay, equal, not too powerful, because under John Adams, he felt that the government was getting too powerful because, especially with the Alien and Sedition Acts, taking, kind of going against our rights those states' rights. So since he thought that the government should be less or just not too powerful, and what were some things that what did he start to do? Dev?
He started to get rid of federal programs.
Yep. That's a nice term to use, got rid. So he got rid of Federalist programs. Abby?
He ended the Alien Sedition Act.
Yes, and one of those things was the Alien and Sedition Acts. He said, enough with that. Got rid of that. What else? What other programs did he get rid of? Or undo? What types of things did he undo? Jacob?
He released prisoners convicted.
Yeah, so those people that were put in prison because of the Alien Sedition Acts, released them. Matthew?
Took away taxes, including the whiskey tax.
Yep, he ended a lot of taxes, including that whiskey tax that caused the Whiskey Rebellion. Braden?
To change the way of government revenue, like instead of Alexander Hamilton's plan of public debt, change it.
Yep, he changed that system because he was against public debt. What else did he do? Dev?
Reduce the size of the military.
Yeah, reduce the size of the military. That's one thing that I think it's going to come to bite him in the butt pretty soon. And then he also reduced the size of, or the number of federal employees because he figured that's going to cut costs because federal employees get paid by the government. And we're trying to get rid of the public debt. Okay, so he got rid of a lot of those things. He started making changes to many different things that John Adams put into place. Okay? Some things that he couldn't control would be things that have to do with the Supreme Court. And why can't he control things that have to do with the Supreme Court? How do you become a justice? Do you remember how you become a justice? Are you voted in? How do you get chosen to be a Chief Justice or a justice in the Supreme Court? Jacob?
The president appoints.
The president appoints you. Well, the Chief Justice spot opened up when John Adams was president. So John Adams got to choose the Chief Justice, and don't you think he would probably choose someone with the same political values as he? Yes, so he chose a guy by the name of John Marshall. John Marshall was 45 years old, and he will go on to serve a very lengthy term and participated in more than 1,000 decisions in the Supreme Court. And there's a lot of things that happened in the Supreme Court that Thomas Jefferson can't really do a lot about. And John Marshall, very good justice. There was a court case called Marbury versus Madison. You should take a look at that on 317. And during this court case, he established something new that created a balance of power among the executive, legislative, and judicial branch. So I want you to write this question out and find out what that is and what it means. How did he create this balance?